Denise, feel free to start when you're ready.
Well, welcome everybody to the fourth in the series of the Power of Place webinars. Luca, can I get you to switch to the next slide, please? Excellent. Today, you will hear from four international experts in the field of geospatial, followed by a question and answer and then a wrap up. So we're hoping today we'll take about 75 minutes of your time. We're really hoping for interactivity today. All are muted except for the speakers, so you won't be able to do that, but please do use the Q&A facility that you find down the side. So hopefully you can all navigate to where you see the chat, add your questions in there, and that will be part of the the process that we'll use for conversation and questions later on in the session today. Luca, can I get you to switch to the next slide, please? I should also say that one of the features of the Zoom webinar that you're using today as well is to upvote the different questions that you see. We'll see that they're the ones that people are most interested in, and then we'll introduce those as part of the panel in there as well. I should introduce myself too. I'll be your chair today. I'm also chair of the Association for Geographic Information, or the AGI, here in the UK. It's the professional association that looks after geospatial professionals across the United Kingdom. And also we interact obviously with the other professional associations and international bodies that represent geospatial too. I was one of the authors of the Power of Place publication too. If you're interested, it's looking at net zero, which is particularly a topic that's at the heart of a lot of what AGI is doing at the moment. And I'll gently plug here that if you're interested in the topic area, please do look up GeoCon, which is coming up later on in November as well. With that, I would like to introduce KTN's Geospatial lead, Luca, to give you a little bit more information about the Knowledge Transfer Network and the OS collaboration, also the publication as well, and some of the activities that will be following on from the publication and work that we've done. So Luca, over to you.
Thank you very much, Denise. I'm Luca and I lead on Geospatial at KTN. I'm also the co-editor of the Power of Place. The thought leadership publication, KTN and Ordnance Survey, have co-produced to highlight some of the challenges and the opportunity to grow the geospatial sectors to its full potential, to tackle some of the greatest challenges the human race has ever faced. In my job, I support the geospatial community to engage cross-sector and reach out to those industry verticals where location intelligence, location data add value, help to grow the economy and achieve positive impact. The publication and the webinar series is part of this effort, supporting the geospatial community to change the narrative around geospatial technology, geospatial data, at the domain of a few tech-savvy geoinformaticians to a fundamental enabler of the world, of the connected, autonomous world we are building today. Geospatial data enables autonomous car to drive down a motorway, construction managers to track assets in large-scale civil engineering projects, city officials to tackle pollution and carbon emissions via better monitoring, for example. In the Power of Place, we want to show that spatial data is not only an input to tackle the global challenges, but rather it helps to contextualize those challenges. It provides a common thread between datasets coming from many different technology, social media, drones, satellites, IoT devices, mobile phones, linking assets in the physical world with a digital counterpart in a cyber physical system. The publication is divided in 3 sections. In the first part, we bring forward the changing landscape of location intelligence, and we discuss the emergence of a powerful data knowledge infrastructure sitting at the nexus of spatial analysis, artificial intelligence, and cloud edge computing, making also reference to the current investment landscape in the sector and the emerging geospatial data market. In the second part, we look at the innovation challenges in the sector. We examine the importance of building trust across collaborating partners to unlock data from silos and use the collective intelligence tools to harness knowledge across sectors. We also explored the importance of thinking in systems to connect the dots across domains and build people-centric solutions that helps to harness the power of digital technology for positive change. In the third part, we reflect on the role of geospatial intelligence plays in tackling global challenges, from addressing climate change and the sustainable development goals to delivering a new framework for responsible investment. We aim to showcase how geospatial is at the heart of building a digital ecosystem for planet Earth. In this webinar, we want to showcase the positive stories coming out from geospatial community. In the previous webinar, we looked at the challenges. We now look at how geospatial is transforming our world today. And we have a fantastic panel for this. I hope you will be inspired by the discussion that we are having today, and I look forward to engage with you all. So please get in touch with Denise, with myself, Andy, the panelists, over the next few months to discuss any of the topics that we raised. Thank you very much for your attention, and back to you, Denise.
Brilliant. Thank you, Luca, for that introduction. I won't add a huge amount more detail, but to really point out and highlight here, as Luca said, one of the things that we're trying to get across in today's topic is to look at that positive impact. I think geospatial, for all of us that have worked in this field for the sort of 20 or 30 years that geospatial data has been available, we've seen incredible changes to how we look at the world, how we understand the world, and how we respond to those challenges that are there. But I think it's really now and kind of in the last perhaps 5 years where we've seen huge impact in the use of broad scale geospatial data and services across the globe. And you'll hear that come through the presentations today. I also want to point out that we said interactive, and we are very keen to interact with you today. So one of the things I will say is if you're a tweeter or if you use social media in any form, please make sure you're getting your comments and your thoughts out into the public domain and share what you're seeing today. Along with the hashtag of the power of place all together. And just to sort of really set the scene and get your involvement and a bit of enthusiasm here too, we've got a Mentimeter to get started. So Panama, if you can put that up on. So if you haven't used Menti before, jump onto the website here of menti.com and use that code. And if you can just put one word that for you describes where you think the next sector the geospatial community should be creating insights for is. I think there's a lot of traditional ones we think of when it comes to geospatial. And I know Luca's mentioned a few there in terms of the climate or environment type areas, but what's the word, what sector do you come from even that you would like to see the geospatial community start to create insights for or start to create work for in there? So if you can go to that website, put the code in 9675868 and add your thoughts in for this Mentimeter, that would be fantastic. You can see a few here. So drones, education. I'm definitely going to explore education a bit more when we get into discussion later on today. Active travel, transport as a service, real time. So I love watching these things start to build, and immediately as soon as I start seeing an answer, I immediately have about 3 questions of kind of, where does that person come from in terms of their sector and what work are they doing to put that up? And I think as somebody who works in this geospatial world, that's what we are. We're kind of people who are constantly asking questions and wanting to know how to create solutions with what we do. So these are always fascinating to see the topics and see the areas and sectors that people see connected with geospatial. I think as any good geo geek would say, geo relates to absolutely everything on the planet. So, that can be a fairly all-encompassing type of community to be part of. But I think, how others that perhaps are outside of our geospatial community see us and also see how we could be making better benefit in the world is a really important part of what we need to do as a geospatial community. So these are great. Now, I should say that, Luca and I will make sure that all of the results that come through the Mentees today, you'll have this one and we'll have a second one later on while we're in discussion. We will make sure that the results of these are published so that you can have a look and have a bit of analysis in here as well. Part of the importance of having panels like we're doing today and doing the knowledge sharing that we do that KTN and AGI both try and create is for us to all learn and for us to kind of grow. At AGI, we always talk about the creation of a thriving geospatial community. And I think the only way we do that is by continually learning about the different aspects of the world that we need to be reaching into and creating more information about. So I think this is great. Excellent. Well, feel free to keep on adding to that. Like I said, we will make sure that we publish this at a later stage so that you can see it and use it, and please contribute. But with that, I think we will continue moving on, and I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Nadine Alamé. So Nadine is the CEO of the Open Geospatial Consortium, which is the international standards body who looks after all of the technical standards for the OGC, and has been around for almost as, I think, just about the same amount of time as the AGI has as well. So it's a similar age in that regard. So Nadine, if you'd like to take us off first.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes. Can you see my slides?
We can see your slides. You're all set.
Success. Thank you. Thank you. We have to double check the basics always. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me, Denise and Luca, to be part of this event. I love the theme of the power of place. I actually have your report printed on my desk, and I've circulated it to everybody that I know. I love the power of people, right? So the AGI community, the knowledge network, my fellow panelists, and everyone on the line, I see like 150 plus sticking, because we're all contributing and participating in this dialogue. So I figured I'll tell you a little bit about myself so you can see what geospatial is to me and then to the world around me. And mostly because the more I think about it, I have spent my whole career trying to get out of geospatial, and each and every time I go back into geospatial. And it's because you'll see why. So let me start with a quick thing. My background is actually in software engineering and computer engineering. And the first time I got into this geospatial is when I got selected to go to MIT for a scholarship to study this thing called Geographic Information Systems, GIS. And who says no to MIT? So, you know, why not? To me, it was like 3D and visualization and a lot of programming. What I did not expect was how wide the range of applications was for this technology that I was starting to study, the geospatial. So I found myself coordinating with the urban planners on where the fire stations, the next schools, the hospitals will be placed. I was talking to transportation engineers on road and highway design and maximizing access to communities. I was talking to environmental engineers and earth scientists about using satellite imagery, right, to get information and transform it into knowledge to solve so many problems. So it's so exciting. This all came together, unfortunately, on 9/11. So September 11 in the US happened. And all of a sudden, I was still a student then, and all of a sudden, all the capabilities that we have been developing as researchers in the geospatial field were all of a sudden critical to rescue efforts, to getting the data right there, right then, to the first responders, to the decision makers, to the world. And the integration of satellite imagery with the socioeconomic, with transportation, emergency, public safety, it became the glue. Luca said, you know, like it's the glue. It was, you know, creating the context. So from there, it was amazing, fascinating. So what happened is I said, you know, let's give this a bigger shot. So I ended up supporting the NASA Earth Sciences Division, and more specifically, the application division of NASA. So what's really cool about this is the entity within NASA that takes all the NASA data, imagery, models, you name it, and makes them available to other agencies and research scientists all over the world. And to me, this is very, very powerful because it's one data that's reusable, repurposable for so many applications. So I said, this is really great. We've seen it all. Let me do something that I know nothing about. How about aviation, right? Guess what? I know it's crazy, but guess what ended up being? Aviation is all geospatial too. The airport maps, the flight plans, the configuration of the airspaces, and most recently, the drones. I mean, nobody wants the drones to collide over their heads, right? And everybody wants their medication or their Starbucks to be delivered at their doorsteps. Think about it, location, place, geospatial, name it whatever you want to name it. So it's all coming together. And then another unfortunate thing, COVID, right? And that's why we're all here, not in person, but it's such a geospatial problem at the end of the day. Where is the nearest hospital with available beds? Sadly, we have projects about where are the nearest funeral homes? Where are the high-risk populations so we can protect them? Where and when do we quarantine and de-quarantine? When and where, right? So all of a sudden it's location. So I said, okay, I give up. I need to be in an organization and in a community like here, like with everybody here on the line. That's OGC to me. It's trying to contribute to making an impact with what we know about geospatial on society. And yes, as Denise mentioned, you know us as the standards organization for all things related to location, but we cannot do it without a community that's committed to this mission of applying our geospatial expertise and technologies and innovation for the good of society. And that's what we'll hear today. And to do this at a global level, global community of experts, making location information findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, fair. Remember that. Deal? So I'm not going to tell you a lot about OGC, but I'll tell you about maybe 3 organizing principles to get the conversation going. First one, geospatial is everywhere. I know you're saying, duh. My kids would say, duh. Geospatial is everywhere. Our part here is we're trying to break out of what we call the geospatial bubble. So geospatial is accessible, location, place, again, call it whatever you want, is accessible to the non-geospatial geeks like me, right? So anybody can use it. So the principle number 2 is the future, whichever way you look at it, honestly, any field, any domain, close your eyes. I love the Menti stuff. The future is in data integration because we're all hungry for knowledge from the data, but you have to start at data integration. And that's why we are working so hard on this fair, yes, on making at least data that has a location element to it. Hint, it's all of the data, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And the last but not least, no one can do it alone. That's why I commend the Knowledge Network, AGI, the OGC community, all of us. You see a lot of momentum out there because none of us can do it alone. And guess what? It's not about the technology. We need the partnerships, we need the collaborations, and my favorite, we actually have the power to bridge the divide. And that's a whole different webinar. So I'll leave you with 2 things. What we're talking about here is from an OGC perspective, technology trends. So we're looking from standards and research and development perspective on how we make it easier to integrate location into everything you see here listed on this page. So how do you combine the building information models and the transportation networks to build digital twins for smart cities? How do you exploit all the amazing terabytes of data from space, from startups going to space, from the devices like your phone, your car, your Alexa, your Internet of Things, devices on the edge. So there's a lot of, out there in terms of technology. In terms of impacts, of challenges, of opportunities, I just want to leave you with one thing. As you listen to my fellow speakers, we are so privileged here to be able to play such an integral part in what I call here the humanity's future. Because if I look at disasters, we have so many examples, unfortunately, but you know, where the disaster is going to hit. So before, during, and after, what do you do with the people? How do you deploy the resources? How do you save lives? How do you relocate? What's the impact on the supply chain? You look at our glue in the smart cities, you know, tons of examples from Rotterdam and Europe to Singapore to the city of St. Louis here in the US. And we can have so many examples again. And not to be forgotten, on the right-hand side, this out of the bubble, real estate, travel, telecom, retail, healthcare. And I think, honestly, this is what popped up first on the Menti, which I love. So last but not least, yes, we're privileged, but there's much work that needs to be done, because we're not going to be able to make the impact and to get the insights. Again, I go back, we're not going to be able to get the insights that we want if we don't start with how do we integrate this data. So we need to ensure the data is fair. Remember that. We need to think about the ethical uses of that data, how to integrate it properly, and how to demonstrate together what's possible so that we can get to the sustainable future with geospatial insights. So I hope I shared some examples that will generate some questions, and I'll pass it back to you, Denise, and I look forward to the rest of the event. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nadine. Now, while our next speaker gets their slides ready, I'll do a quick introduction. So, Michael, hopefully you've got your camera on as well. So, Michael Grove from Topolytics. I think it's fair to say, I think, Mike, this might be actually, I think, almost our third panel, I think, that you and I have done together in recent times. So I'm really pleased to see you in this particular conversation today, because I think when it comes to impact, there's no doubt that for me, looking at the area of waste management and the circular economy is really, really important space for us to be looking at the moment. And I think the Topolytics story is a fantastic illustration of that. So Mike, in that sense, I'll introduce Michael. So Michael Grove is the CEO of Topolytics, and Michael, take it away.
Thanks, Denise. When you're chairing these sessions, I never have panel fatigue, so no worries on that score. So I'm going to talk about the industrial revolution, and basically about what we're doing as Topolytics to fundamentally make the world's waste visible, verifiable, and valuable. And I'll talk a bit about how we see taking a geospatial kind of perspective on that material is absolutely vital to understand what's happening to that material as a start of attempt, but then also being able to work out what could happen to that material, because currently the outcomes are not brilliant. So I'll just pick up on Nadine's kind of point about why she does what she does. I mean, why do I do what we do? So why am I involved in the world of waste management? Well, where there's muck, there's brass, as a starter for 10. But I guess I'll take you back 25 years. So the picture on your left is a logging camp, I think somewhere in Kalimantan. So I was basically doing sustainable forest management auditing on behalf of the Forest Stewardship Council. And so that was my kind of daily view. But the picture on your right was the occasional view on the days off. And, too often one would find a tide line with, with sort of ocean-borne plastic and litter, et cetera, And that really got me asking that question: where did that material come from? How did that material end up in that location? So there you go. There's a clue in that somewhere. So in terms of that problem, then, that sort of issue with waste management as a sort of global, or waste as a global challenge, I mean, I think the numbers kind of speak for themselves. So, if you look at kind of World Bank numbers, the volume of waste that we generate in cities and urban areas over the next sort of 20, 30 years is just going to go up. So, the quantum's going to grow, the direction of travel is there. And we can, yes, we can sort of start to design that material out of that waste out of the system. You know, we can move to a more kind of circular models where we keep that material at its highest utility, but we're still having to face up to the fact that that material just keeps on coming. It still keeps being generated, and something has to happen to that material. And the problem at the moment is that a large majority of that material is still just basically going into a hole in the ground. So it's going into a landfill site, it's going into a waste dump, or it's leaking into the environment. And as we all know, ending up in oceans, in rivers, and you know, and there's a huge sort of problem building up there. But the great thing is, though, that material all has a value. You know, it's got some kind of material and financial value that if we can extract the value, then we can kind of start to change what's happening to that material. So that's what we're doing as Topolytics. So we're trying to make this system, and this is obviously just a kind of summary sort of schematic, where you've got multiple materials, you've got multiple organizations, you've got waste carriers, processors, brokers, you've got multiple sort of outcomes and technologies for that material. So you've got a really, really complex system. But the problem at the moment is that system is not particularly data driven. It's a very traditional industry, and consequently, the outcomes for that material are still, you know, not ideal from both a commercial or an environmental or a sort of social point of view. So what we're trying to do is actually reflect the fact that that system is a real system of real material that is being moved around the place. So we cannot escape the geography of waste. You know, the where of waste is absolutely crucial to really try and understand the impact of that material and what's happening to that material, but also start to design interventions where we can start to improve the outcomes and reduce the impact attached to the movement of that material. And that's basically what we're doing as Topolytics. So fundamentally, we're a data analytics kind of business, and we aggregate data, and then we process it, and then we analyze it. We generate sort of answers for our customers. And our platform is called WasteMap. So it kind of does what it says on the tin, really. And so what we're doing is basically coming back to what Nadine was saying about the need to actually triangulate on the truth from a whole range of different sort of data sources. And that's exactly the same within the sort of the waste sector. So, you know, there isn't a single perfect, beautiful digital footprint for that material. You've got multiple materials, it's measured in different ways, it's handled by different organizations, and that data is stored and processed and generated in many different ways, whether it be spreadsheets, software, sensors, satellites, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we do. We sort of try and build a version of the truth by pulling all that data together from those different sources. And that way, then we can generate answers for waste producers, for the waste industry, and for regulators that allows them to sort of put these interventions in place to change the outcomes for that material. So we get more recovery of that material, we get less material being moved significant distances, and we ultimately get a better sort of commercial and environmental and social outcome. And that's what we're doing. And one of the things that we are doing in the UK is we're collaborating with the Ordnance Survey and a range of partners on creating a digital tracking system for all of the UK's waste. So this is on behalf of DEFRA and all of the environmental regulators across the UK nations. And what we're doing is we're digitizing the current sort of system of regulation, which is very paper-based. But the same approach that we take generally to waste on a sort of global basis, we're taking to that project where we're ingesting data from a range of different sources, because you've got many different companies who are sort of managing that data in many different ways. So that's really us. So I guess, again, I would support what Nadine was saying about the need for interoperability, the need for collaboration, if we are going to address some of these kind of major sort of global challenges that we have. But fundamentally, we think that or certainly I think that geospatial plays an absolutely vital role in that, and not just in terms of what we're doing, but across the board. So that's me. Thank you very much.
And that's where Denise needs to find her unmute button so she can introduce the next speaker. Apologies about that, everybody. So the next person I would like to introduce to you is Richard Britton from, now is it Alsis? Is that how you pronounce it?
That's right, Denise, Alsis.
No worries. I'm really keen to have a look at this presentation. I had a quick look at your website on this, and I've known about the company for a bit, but you've got one of the most impressive front page fly-throughs of a map that I've seen to get to a place on many different websites. So if you haven't had a look, do go and have a quick look at the front page of this website. But Richard's here to talk to us a bit, I guess, about population and helping those, locating nomadic pastoralists in here. So I'm keen to hear more about what you've got to say in this area. So take it away, Richard.
Brilliant. Thank you, Denise. Hopefully the slides are coming through now. Well, so Michael's just given a fabulous example of how geospatial systems are helping that linkage between the global systems of macro down to micro levels of diagnostics and solution applications. And so in a similar way, what I want to do is illustrate a case study for you that we're adopting and drawing on geospatial systems from the macro to the micro.
Sorry, Richard. It doesn't look like your slides have gone into presentation mode. It seems to be whirring away in the background. Might need to stop sharing. Maybe we'll go back in. Oh yeah, there you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Poonam. So this is a case study of some work we've recently delivered for a client, really showing how ALSYS is helping improve the lives of the world's most vulnerable. So here's the problem. For thousands of years, nomadic pastoralist tribes have traveled freely across the borders of the Middle East and Central Asia. They were once the most prolific group of merchants who traveled the old trade routes of the region. Now, in the region of Afghanistan, they're called Kuchis, which means those who go on migrations. And after 40 years of war, Afghanistan is one of the poorest countries in the world. And currently, Kuchis represent one of the largest and most vulnerable groups in the country at about 1 to 2 million. But we just simply don't know how many there are. Not only are they trying to maintain their ancient and traditional ways of life, but right now they're trying to survive in the face of conflict, predation by armed groups, droughts, floods, disease, and grinding poverty. One of our clients is now trying to deliver to the Kuchis dedicated help and support to improve their lives. But with more than 1 million spread across the mountains and the valleys of this highly varied terrain, it's best delivered when Kuchis congregate. And one of the annual congregations each year is in October and November for mating season. And whilst there's patchy historical knowledge of some of the locations of these annual congregations, it's not current and it's far from complete. Indeed, there are many Kuchi groups that are simply not known about. They're not documented. They're certainly not on any maps because they like to remain private and away from others. And so we simply don't know where the congregations of these traditional herding groups take place. So the challenge then is to map these concentration areas at mating season. And we took a 5-stage approach to resolving this. And I'll take you through each of these 5 steps in turn. So the first was to look at literature. What existing documents were in place? And here's an image 50 years apart to show that not much has changed at the individual household level. They're very much relying still on tents, camels to move them, and moving their herds through the available rangeland grass through the seasons. But we collated what we could, and from it, we started to do very detailed mapping where the literature was able to describe routes from village to village, up certain valley passes and the like, which allowed us to generate the first national level detailed migratory route map for the country. So just having this established is a first and is a fabulous resource now for those others working in the wider sort of pastoralist support network groups. But for this particular problem, what we then had to find, well, where were they going to be in the October, November time period? And so we looked along these routes and we created these red bubbles, which we call areas of interest, which are these periods where we believe we would find them at various locations across the country. And we generated 60 of them. In imagery, coochie herding groups look like this. They arrange themselves in groups of anywhere between 2 to 10 tents and travel together, mix their herds and move through the rangeland grasses. And you can see in some of these instances, this is aircraft imagery, so it's very high resolution, but we can see the livestock as well as the tents. So we're able to look at imagery and we're able to spot map the locations we're finding, in this case, tents as a proxy indicator of herding sizes. So if you see 2 tents, you're going to have less livestock there than you might if you see 10 tents, for instance. But we're also able to observe the numbers of times we observe them in the imagery through different years. So we're looking at imagery between 2008 to 2020. We're also then looking at the size of the herding groups and by location in each of these areas of interest. And you can see now, if we go back to the area of interest red circle mapping, we can put those results back into those red circles, and we now end up with this final map. And this, because of the multi-year observation, gives us confidence that where you see in particular the green, but going through the red locations, that is where you're going to find coochies in October and November each year. Well, so what? Now we've got field surveyors and veterinary outreach groups going to these areas with smartphones to geo-reference the locations in more detail now, which is fabulous, but also in those areas deliver support. And in that way, improve the lives of these really misunderstood and under-supported, impoverished communities. But I think, globally though, my final point, I just want to say that this approach, this method, can be applied globally across other fragile and conflict-affected states, and in particular the Sahel, in Mali, Niger, Chad, Sudan, where there is conflict between nomadic pastoralist groups and other armed groups. And unless we understand where they are and their vulnerabilities, then it's hard for us to support them. And this method is something that's directly liftable and applicable to these areas as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. Now, I'm hoping that we've got our fourth presenter online now, who will be David Henderson. While we're just switching over to the different presenters, can I remind everybody that we have got a question and answer section, and I will be drawing from your questions as part of the discussion that we have after David's done his presentation. So if you're able to get in there, not only add your questions, but please go in and have a look at the questions others have added to the list and add your votes to them as well, because that will help me to direct those to our presenters when we're talking on the panel in a moment. So with that, I'd like to introduce our last presenter for the day, who's David Henderson, and is the Chief Geospatial Officer for the Ordnance Survey. So David, do you want to take it away, please?
Thanks so much, Denise. Can you hear me okay and see the screen's up as well, is it?
Yes, all perfect.
Perfect. Well, listen, thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure to contribute to the panel today. I loved Richard's last presentation. It was fantastic. It's great to see something brand new and something that's not been presented to me. I haven't seen that before, so that was really interesting. I just thought in sort of recognizing I'm sort of doing a few concluding remarks, I guess, in terms of the panel introductory remarks there, I just kind of wanted to kind of return in a way to the Power of Place publication, which we were so delighted to work with KTN earlier this year, and just sort of bring a few remarks at this point in the webinar series together. There's undoubtedly a structural shift happening in the way that we understand, observe, interact with the world round about us. And I think for geospatial, this is a really important moment. A key driver of this shift is an increasing demand for certainty and an assurance in the provenance and quality of geospatial data. And I don't think we've really seen that demand so explicitly stated before. At the core of that is a demand for intelligent and actionable insight, leading to positive impact, whether that be for policy, service delivery, commercial outcomes. But it's quite clear, I think, both domestically here in the UK and internationally, the nations and businesses who are successfully providing for their citizen customers are those who are making informed decisions from an analysis of trusted location data. And I think, there's a lot to celebrate within that. I'm just going to try and find a way of moving these slides on. Great. So I think below that demand for quality trusted data, I think there's some really interesting sort of trends, I guess, that are emerging within that, things that we absolutely see from our customers and stakeholders. Ordnance Survey is so rare in recent times for customers to have been really explicit about the specific geographic description of data that they want. I think there's always that kind of technical demand for different types of data, but more explicitly, we see users talking about the need for actionable insight, the need to have data that informs their decision making and that contributes to service and policy delivery, commercial prosperity, problem solving. The outcomes in our customers' minds and our users' minds are ever more prominent, irrespective of whether they're running national governments or whether they're trying to solve problems day to day on their desktop using geospatial data. And I think, in terms of the maturity of the geospatial industry, to have been able to move to a world where the demand is for these types of characteristics in our trusted data is really important. I use this slide, I guess, because I've talked to it a couple of times recently, and I think it's kind of quite helpful for those of us in the geospatial sector just to stand back for a minute at times, and I reflect maybe on myself and our own organisation when I say this, and that there are some absolutely fundamental values for geospatial infrastructure, and I guess I mean this at the kind of at a national level. Absolutely, for underpinning secure and transparent land ownership, land tenure, we forget just how much of the world's land is yet unregistered and the value of that land in itself. This year, if it's taught us, I guess, anything in these desperate times, has just been the importance of trusted data when we're planning for, when we're responding, and indeed when we will recover from national situations such as that of COVID-19. And some of the biggest challenges of our generation are really demonstrating the importance of geospatial infrastructure. I think never before have we needed to relate the level of national investment to geography, whether this is a reflection on the kind of levelling up agenda within our own country, or whether this is just directly targeting our policy outcomes to geographical locations where those outcomes will have biggest impact, targeting the investment to where place matters. And just, you see that every night in the news at present of just how important that has been coming. So I think it's a real moment to celebrate those maximum celebrate those huge differentiating contributions that geospatial infrastructure will continue to make. Earlier this year, we talked about this in an earlier webinar session. I just kind of draw attention, I guess, to anyone who hasn't yet been able to read through the UN publication that Ordnance Survey was delighted to support this year in terms of the future trends that are impacting global geospatial information management over the next 10 years. And I think what was really encouraging to see from the global consensus that built around this report was not just the rise of new data sources, analytical methods, technological advances that you'd expect to see really come to the fore, but a huge amount about the evolution in user requirements, in the legislative context for data, I heard Nadine talking about trust in data. I know that's something that, Denise, you're really passionate about, the trust and ethics of our location data, and the importance of that in the discussions that we're starting to have. But I think to see the maturity and understanding of these other more macro dimensions in the geospatial industry should give us huge confidence that we really are making a huge difference on a global and national level. And I guess I'm just going to finish off with this last slide, actually, which for me increasingly brings things together from this webinar series, which is, you know, optimistically, we face into the next 10 years with a phenomenal opportunity. I had the real pleasure of chairing one of the last webinars where David Jensen from UNEP really spoke passionately about the work that the UN Environment Programme was taking to ensure that geospatial infrastructure was at the heart of sustainable planning on a global basis. We're seeing huge global trends in expanding urbanization, concerns about food production, climate change issues, sustainable land management. You know, these are all putting the globe under serious pressure. And we know just how significant the contribution that geospatial infrastructure can make. I think all of our speakers today have talked about different dimensions of that. And I think we're really well placed, both as an industry and as organizations contributing in that, whether it's government, whether it's private sector, to contribute towards these really powerful outcomes. And I think, you know, I just love Nadine's finishing point in her slides about, you know, the privilege it is to, at this point in time, have the opportunity to contribute to some of these most significant impacts. And I think, you know, the Power of Place document, which KTN has helped us bring together, just really sets out the overall contribution that we can all make. So, I mean, in conclusion, really, I just think, you know, the opportunity is just fantastic now to really utilize the capabilities we have to make a huge difference to society, whether that's at national level, international level, to individual citizens, and help deal with some of the most fundamentally challenging problems that face us in the world today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute today. Back to you, Denise.
Excellent. Thank you, David. I think you used two of my favorite words there, both ethics and sustainability, all in your presentation. So thanks for that. Can we get, Poonam, are we able to get the other panelists up on screen now as well? Is that something we can do to get conversations going? I can see people, please do keep adding your questions in there. I can see them, and keep voting them up in there as well. Excellent. I think we've got everybody now. Wonderful. Okay, so to kick things off, you know, we want to make this pretty discursive. So I will start you all off with a fairly general question, which has been voted up very much to the top here. It's rather long, so let me paraphrase this a little bit, because it's quite focusing on looking at the insights that time and place can give for looking at, I think, future energy systems. And this, I think, really, David, sort of links quite well to sort of what you've just been talking about from a sustainability perspective. In looking at the question, I think this is, you know, what is it that geospatial can do to help visualize those future needs? And I think, you know, let's say resources here, not just energy. But I think we've talked a lot today often about the things that we are doing now, with applications we know are happening. But would someone like to kick us off with kind of what is it that geospatial can do to help us understand more that future requirement? And I guess, you know, this is a bit of the world of modeling here. Does anyone want to kick us off with an answer?
I can give it a shot.
Thanks, Nadine.
I don't have the answer. I can give it a shot because I think it's a fantastic question and pulls a lot of things together. I think what I'd like to contribute here is we're doing so much, again, as a community on the artificial intelligence and the machine learning. So this is how you get the future needs, by understanding what has happened in the past. And I think, you know, back to the tribe example, that's a perfect example. You look in the past to predict the future. So once you have that much information over space and time, you can start looking ahead and feeding all the other criteria. And then with respect to how do you visualize it, I think this is exactly where we're trying to pull all this information into not specifically geospatial visualization tools, right? This is why we're, you know, connecting with the augmented reality, with the virtual reality, with the world out there that can help us, you know, the Hollywood, the video games, right? All of this is actually coming together. So it is definitely, you know, taking modeling and simulation to the next level. So it's, you know, it's not just actionable insights, but actually making sense insights to everybody, the citizens and also the decision makers.
David, would you like to add to that?
Well, I can have a go. It reminds me of a conversation I was having with a well-known colleague of ours in the UK geospatial industry. I'll not name him for sake of implicating him in my answer, I guess, just now. But you know, he was listening to the radio driving through the Scottish borders and was listening to the national radio say it's raining in Scotland today. And of course, it was beautiful sunny weather where he was. And it got us both into having this conversation of how well do we know our country, and how well do we relate to this. And I just think there's a great opportunity, Nadine says visualization, to engage everyone, citizens, consumers, however we want to describe the public in this regard, to really understand the relationship visually through space in terms of supply and demand. I think David Jensen had this huge thing in his talk in the last webinar about sustainability performance of production and influencing consumer behavior as a result of that, being able to measure and verify. I'm sure Michael can talk to that much better than me. But there's a moment of, I sort of sense that we can do a lot more to tell stories visually, and at the simplest of level to visualize the relationship between, in this case, where energy is created and where energy is consumed, and to really help everyone understand their own personal relationship with that. So I think, there's an answer in there of sorts, but I certainly think at the lowest level, GIS plays a phenomenally powerful role in helping to educate and expose some of those patterns.
Richard, I know you're keen to contribute there as well. Thank you, David.
David and Nadine, just following on from those, it is very much an issue or question around production and consumption. We can model where points of production for energy systems would best be optimized. And you just look at the recent news about the world's largest solar farm in Australia feeding Singapore for export. Now, that supply then is a fascinating consideration. But in terms of consumption, for me, it's about population modeling and the future, what the future looks like in terms of the global population, locations and concentrations. There's great advances going on at the moment, mapping population, but in some of the more challenged areas, it remains really in its infancy. David pointed to this earlier about land tenure not being as developed as it could and should be. However, there's probably sufficient global data now through the different data sets that are derived to now start doing the modeling to say, well, what will it look like in 5-10 years time, and therefore how are those future concentrations in particular best served by the energy systems?
Now, thank you very much, Richard. Michael, did you have a contribution to that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I'm just looking out the window and I don't think it's raining in Scotland at the moment, or certainly in Edinburgh. So that's a relief. Yeah, no, I think to David's point about kind of storytelling, and if you think about it, what is a map? A map arguably is one of the greatest storytelling devices that that we have created, and certainly from our point of view, if you like, the mapping side of what we do in terms of looking at those kind of that, if you like, you want to call it that downstream materials kind of system, is absolutely vital to getting people thinking differently about it, and that's because that's one of the big problems with, if you like, waste, is the fact that it's been out of sight, out of mind. Somebody else manages it, somebody else deals with it. We outsource the problem to somebody else. And so once you start showing people what is happening and the significant distances that material's moving, it absolutely does start them thinking about it differently, and you start to move towards a sort of behavior change kind of situation. But I think the other point about that is, of course, underneath all of that, there is a sort of huge power in terms of the analysis that we can then do on, what's happening to that material, where does that material go, and then to the point about modeling, actually the way we would track material through the system, because it's very, very difficult to track a bottle or a piece of waste through that system, is all about modeling, and it's all about sort of providing a level of confidence about what might happen to it and where might it go. So I think, yeah, I think it's beautiful because you've got that wonderful means of visualizing and storytelling, but underneath it, you've got that huge power in relation to the sort of the analytical side of geospatial as well.
Thank you, Michael. I think that captures quite nicely kind of the multifaceted element of that sort of question. I'm going to move us now to a topic area that I know for AGI at the moment, we are really looking in quite a lot of, and that's education. I've got kids at high school at the moment. My son rolled his eyes at me the other day when he had to do a geography assignment. And he's like, Mum, come on, you're the mappy person, come and help me with this. But the question that we've got here, I think is, given this need to tell those stories with maps, given this need to do that visualization, I'm a total map geek. I've loved this for 20 years in terms of what the power of these stories can do. But I was never excited about it at high school with the way it got presented to me in that sort of space. So how do we infuse, I guess, that enthusiasm in students to want to pursue a profession that is kind of underpinned by use of geospatial in this way? What are the hot tips that you'd like to see going on in the education system? Who wants to go first? Go, Nadine.
Because I have kids, your kids' age. And we live with our kids now 24 hours a day for months at a time. We love them too. So anyways, and I think, Denise, just like you, I am faced with the same question on so many topics. I mean, my son is 13 years old now, and he's studying history, and he's like, why do I need this? Why do I need this? And what I'm finding is actually exactly what we're talking about here, which is we have to show them, the implications. And I think it goes back to the storytelling. So it's not just like, here's a bit because it may be good for you in the future. We actually have the capability right now, the tools, right? It's so easy to build a map. It's so easy to build a map with a slider in time. It's so easy to see the goods, moving from one part, of the map to another part. And I think to make it, I would say, we use this professionally, right? Use case driven. So it's not instead of information, here it is. It's actually around projects, and they could be, I think they could be local projects. So they actually click, here's how the food that you eat at the cafeteria, here's where it comes from all over the world. And here's why, during the pandemic, we were out of toilet paper because the shipments didn't make it and people got sick. And, it's like these kinds of showing them the problem. And we have the tools, like you said, Denise. We're not short on tools. We're not short on data. It's just making it meaningful. Insights. Hope that helps.
No, I agree. Who's next?
I think Nadine's answer probably captures most of it, actually. Denise, I think in many respects, what are we talking about? We're talking about educating and handling data, in problem solving, in analysis, storytelling. That isn't what I remember kind of geography at school being about, but of course it is, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a language thing that we perhaps don't understand enough of, just how much great teaching is carried out, and those of us who are afforded with those great teachers, they hold on in your mind forever, right? The impact. But I think we have all got an opportunity to contribute to teaching at all levels, whether that's in schools, whether it's in universities, as professionals. I think there's a whole range of initiatives where we can personally get involved, and I think I would certainly advocate that at every opportunity. The nature of the curriculum today makes it really difficult for teachers to step outside of the curriculum. But my own experience is that teachers are always very, very keen to have professionals coming in and supporting them to do something just a little bit different, and to open the eyes beyond that. So I think, if you've got an interesting story to tell, particularly about something that's happened in your community, your neighborhood, go and talk to your local school and offer to tell that story. I'd be very surprised if anyone didn't bite your arm off to hear about it.
Go for it, Richard. Thank you, David.
Well, I'd add two perspectives to this. I think, yes, education in terms of technical resourcing is vital, of course, but I think we miss at times the need to educate middle and senior management within organizations and institutions to use those technologies, resources in a really effective way. ALSIS has been delivering capacity development in conflict countries for 15 years now, and what we've learned is we don't just train operators and analysts, we train middle and senior management to ask them, how are you going to integrate this within your business model? How are you going to properly budget and resource this? And ultimately, how is this going to really help your organization, not just provide outputs as maps or spatial products, but actually outcomes and impact within whatever you're seeking to achieve? And that whole sort of modeling maturity of these organizations and their use of geospatial capabilities is really important and often overlooked. So that would be one. The other one is we're delivering, or we're a partner on a Research Council's UK project at the moment. It's a Global Challenges research funded activity. We've got 12 research partners. I sat around the table, we've got 12 PhDs plus me, bringing in the geospatial capabilities. Now, these are social scientists, don't often use these technologies. So how do you get academics and the research areas to start using these things? So we're working with them, but actually for them, one of the challenges, when you produce, let's say, a 50-page, 100-page report, who's going to read it? Really, who's going to read it? And visualizations, and in particular, Denise, what you said about story maps, and narrating stories and the time and space dynamics through the visualizations is a really powerful 2-minute video that you can put out in front of the research. Now, ALSIS a couple of months ago was featured by the BBC for an article, some research it supported. And part of the reason it was picked up by the BBC was not because the 50-page report had been released, was actually the animation that we created for it was starting to get attention because people could then get into the substance of the issues. And that was all about geospatial visualization. So it's got that much broader application, which is powerful too.
I would agree. Michael, would you like a last
well,
comment?
I would hesitate to comment on education. I mean, I spent 3 years going into my daughter's school and talking to them about mapping and digital sort of geospatial data and all that kind of stuff. And my daughter's gone on to become a mechanical engineer. So, there you go. But I think, yeah, there's definitely something here about terminology and words and what we say about geospatial, like what is it? What does that mean to people out there, whether it be school kids or whether it be to university students or whether it be, to Richard's point, those working in business who could and probably are using geospatial technology, like e-commerce companies are a geospatial business, are they not? So people are using these technologies, but they're perhaps not recognizing that what they are. And so I think there's definitely a language thing that I think we could be better at if we're trying to sort of, sell the sizzle to the outside world. And I think certainly the sector, if you think about, the sort of the geo as a kind of sort of industrial sector, it's been sort of plowing along for many years, but clearly there's huge opportunities out there in other fields of business, in other sectors that could use some of these technologies to their benefit. So I think it behooves us to sort of basically use the language that they would understand in order to get them engaged with some of these technologies. And we've had a debate online on the chat today about people saying, well, why do you call it resources map rather than waste map? And we absolutely have been through the ringer on this, but ultimately we call it waste map because if we talk about resources, it might mean raw materials, it might mean virgin raw materials, it might mean people. But if we talk about waste, people kind of go, oh yeah, okay, we get it. And then you can move on from there and start to sort of get clever about it. So I think there is definitely something there about the way we collectively use language in relation to what we're doing.
Well, not a topic for today to continue on, but I know that there's something cooking in AGI that's around that topic exactly at the moment. So keep your eyes for an event that'll be around the language of location coming up soon. just before we keep going with discussion, I know that Luca and Poonam have got another Menti for us to be involved with. So Poonam, if you wanted to put the next one up on screen and then people can contribute to that one, that would be great. So this one is, having, listened to our 4 experts on the panel today, but also from your own knowledge as well, where do you believe location data and insights has already, had the biggest impact? What do you think our big successes have been already within this particular space? So if people can contribute, that would be fantastic. While they're doing that, I'll add some more comment here. It's interesting we're talking about language, and Richard, I really loved that you pointed out about that middle management sort of tier. I was on a panel on the other week, actually, a big conversation here looking at the planning changes that are being proposed here in the United Kingdom. And I heard someone on that coin a really great phrase. And it was that what we need is more people who have a geospatial literacy to them. So it's not about making them experts. There is a whole profession to being a geospatial technician or specialist within that space. And that will continue to be a specialty that's required because it's a challenging type of data to be involved with. But what they said was really missing in so many organizations was people who just need a bit more understanding, just need a bit more literacy in how to interpret the maps or how to interpret the data, perhaps to be able to have a bit of that play within a geospatial information system without having to be overwhelmed with learning ArcGIS or QGIS and so forth to be able to do these things. But I think you're right, there's a real opportunity here for us. And I think part of that potential teaching in those layers of organizations, I think would also help us with that language, because that also gives us an opportunity to help people understand some of those terms within that we do use on a regular basis. So I think that for me, that's a really critical point there. I will say also, I have been into my kids' school when they were younger as well. And Nadine will laugh at this particular story, because it was back in the very early days when I was working for OGC and my kids were in reception class, and they said, would you come in and talk about what you do? And I said, you want me to teach you about geospatial standards to 5-year-olds? And I think I must have looked horrified at the time. But one of the great things about going through that exercise was it taught me a lot about language. It taught me a lot about the way we talk to people. And I thought, if I can get a 5-year-old to understand most of what I do, then actually I should be able to get anybody to understand what I'm doing. And I think sometimes we have to sort of think down to that, how would I explain this to a 5-year-old? And actually, if I can do that, then I can probably explain this to anybody. So it's a really valuable thing there. Right, let's have a look at this Menti. So interestingly, transport has come up as the highest in here. We've got transport, logistics. What's fascinating is I'm going to make a bold statement here and say that I think if we ran this, say 10 years ago, words that I see that are much smaller, like disasters, would probably, an emergency response would likely have been actually much higher, I think, in this space when we thought about geospatial. And to me, that's a really great sign, maturity-wise, that people actually believe that transport and logistics and so forth now are actually some of the really big places that we've had huge impact. So to me, that shows a lot of movement for us as a community of professionals to sort of be progressing our way through these. So hopefully when we see the difference between this one and the other Menti, we'll be able to do a bit of analysis on where we need to be focusing next. Excellent. Okay, well, I think we might continue with the discussion. We've got about another 15 minutes or so with this. So Poonam, if we can get back to there. And I have got so many questions. So to everybody in the audience, I do apologize, but there's no way I'm going to get through 29 questions with this panel session in 20 minutes, because I think we might be speaking at speed if we do that. So let me go to a bit of a general one. And this is looking kind of quite macro at this point, and picks up a little bit, I think, on David's last slide when he was talking about sustainability in here. And Luca opened at the beginning talking about the fact that we here in the UK will have COP26 next year, but obviously that's the world's leaders coming together, looking at one of the biggest challenges, that will probably the biggest challenge that we have as a planet at the moment with the climate crisis. If thinking about you and your positions that you hold, all of you are, CEOs or very senior people within our geospatial community. what would be the message about geospatial and its capability and its value towards solving this climate issue that we've got? What is the one thing that you would want the leaders of the world to understand about this incredible tool and resource that we've got? So think about your elevator pitch here. You know, if you've got 10 world leaders bailed up in the elevator, and you had your kind of 30 seconds to tell them, what would be your language? What would you want to share with them about the value of what it can do to help with our climate crisis that we've got? I'm going to go backwards here because, Michael, you've managed to go last every single time. So I'm going to put you first.
Well, do you know what? I actually had an answer prepared for this one. So yeah, I think, so we're doing a project at the moment looking at materials, or sort of waste and byproducts and sort of materials flows through, out of, into Scotland. And the reason we're doing that, and we're working with Zero Waste Scotland and others on that, is that if you're thinking about the climate emergency and climate change, certainly in Scotland's case, and I think this is, you know, this is similar elsewhere, 74% of Scotland's carbon emissions are directly attributable to the production, the consumption, the use of goods and materials. So you cannot remove the materials piece from the climate change puzzle. Obviously, there's a big focus on energy, but I think looking at that materials piece is crucial. So the way to look at it, of course, is to understand where those materials are, what's happening to those materials, how far are they moving, and what's happening to them. So geospatial is absolutely at the core of addressing that particular part of the climate emergency puzzle. So that would be my pitch to the powers that be.
I like it. I like it. Nadine, did you want to go next?
Sure, I'm always ready. So my pitch would be to look at each leader in the eyes and just say, I know you are powerful, powerful leaders, but none of your government organizations, none of your individual departments have all the data that's needed to understand something as global as climate change. And that's why we need the data to be able to talk to each other so that we can figure out this global problem, so that you can figure out what to do in your country and in your region. We gotta work together, but the data also has to work together. You need OGC. You said elevator pitch.
Yeah, no. Good sales pitch. Good sales pitch. David, I think you've got mic off at the moment. Did you want to contribute to that one?
You know, there's something really simple and powerful about everything happens somewhere, isn't there? And I think for climate impacts, that's absolutely to the key of it. So simplicity, you know, and I think the other thing is make it personal. You know, I mean, we've touched on this in several bits today, but you know, understand impact. There are some horrific scenes around the world to which we're all individually contributing, but we don't see it as an individual problem. And I think, you know, the power of data that is accessible to us, and we talked about it already, allows us to show the relationship between cause and effect. And I think, you know, the time is now to help society understand their own personal contribution to environmental impact around the world. And I think, you know, there is an opportunity for us to demonstrate that perhaps a little bit more effectively than we traditionally do. And to do that, not in a blame sense, but to do it in an empowering sense, you know, to show that actually taking local action in your community, in your region, in your country does make a difference and can contribute to a more sustainable future.
I like that. I imagine, David, you're probably also part of helping formulate the UK's response, so you might get some ideas out of these comments today. Richard, did you want to go next, please?
Yeah, sure. No, I follow up very much aligned with what both Nadine and David have said there. For me, I look at this very much as an opportunity and a threat here. You know, the data around climate change and the climate concerns are well documented and are constantly improving. Political systems do not operate at times based on data. And geospatial data in particular, given its resolution and precision, is quite a threat. And that's our greatest hurdle here, is how do you overcome this perception of threat? And I go back to David's point there about accountability. here. Now, political leaders always want to have a legacy when they depart. They always hark back to their brilliance and how they've been amazing. And I really do think if we can create greater individual responsibilities and associate impact to them in their tenure around their actions and impacts around climate, both positive and, frankly, I think we need to be quite aggressive about this, negatively, then there might be some traction in terms of dealing with the political legacy or lethargy around legacies. I could talk more, but I'll just leave it there. I think I've said enough.
Not a worry. We've got a few more minutes. Now, I know that most of you would be incredibly surprised if I didn't ask you an ethics question in here after what I've been doing for the last 12 months. And I think particularly after Richard described, that data can be perceived as a threat. If I think back to the sort of 20 years or so that I've been in working within Geospatial, we've always been about how do we get more data? How do we connect it together? How do we make it accessible, etc.? What seems to have happened in the last sort of few years that we've hit a bit of a tipping point where actually we do have a superpower of data connection that we do at the moment. I think if you look at the issues of like the Cambridge Analytica fiasco was a huge wake-up call for people about the power of what this integration can do. From a panel perspective, what are your thoughts on how we get that balance right? Now that we're kind of wearing personal sensors essentially with us, with mobile phones and sports watches and all of these different, even our cars, there are so many different elements that are collecting real-time location data about us that can be really, really powerfully useful, can also really lead to some pretty significant harm if not handled properly. How do we as a community kind of get that balance right? And I guess, where do you see the responsibility lying for us doing some of that?
I think
Michael,
Michael, go ahead, please.
Michael, go.
I mean, does it not come back to a certain extent to consent, whether you're dealing with data from, personal data, or dealing with data from a commercial entity? One would always try to seek consent for how you might use it and what it might be used for, particularly if you might be, sort of aggregating and using it, in a sort of third-party context. I think, it seems to me that often it's when there is no consent being sought that's when there are, potential problems. So that, I think that's certainly one thing that probably needs to be built in, doesn't it?
Just before I go to David, I'm going to follow up with this one, because this is a really interesting point that I've heard a lot of businesses go, but I ask people, it's in my terms and conditions. They clicked okay and said it's okay. So my follow up to you, Michael, with that particular comment around consent, do you think that we do that, though, well enough that people are educated when they click that consent so that they really understand what it is that they're clicking on?
Absolutely. I was certainly not sort of a blanket sort of approval for the way that's being done. I'm equally as confused by some of those tick box exercise. So no, I agree. I think the way it's done is crucial as well. And at the moment, too often it isn't being done in a open and transparent way.
Cool. Thank you for doing the follow up there, Michael. Now I think David, you were going to go next, and then Richard.
Yeah, and listen, Denise, I mean, I really applaud the work that the Benchmark Initiative has been doing this year, along with that of American Geo in the US. And I think there's some really important, it's a really important debate for us to be having. I guess, consent, I agree with the debate you've just been having with Michael, actually. I think consent is undoubtedly where it starts, but it's really, really difficult. And I think I just make the observation that some of the most powerful insights, and we know this in a legitimate sense, the most powerful insights is when you put data together. Data that goes together with hindsight for reasons for which it was never collected in the first place. And I think that's only a pattern of technology development is going to increase. So machines will take data from disparate sources and put it together in a way that we can never legislate or regulate. So I think you then have to go right back to the beginning and have a much greater awareness of what data we're personally sharing, what data we're comfortable with sharing, and just and encourage best practice. And that's why I think the work of Benchmark and similar initiatives to try and exercise a common charter to which businesses can sign up to, which plays to best practice around the way in which data is subsequently reused. Businesses have a habit of mining data for purposes for which society is not actually that comfortable, and we need to find a way of finding an appropriate level of acceptance, the fact that you cannot hold back better use of data. I mean, I guess I'm an optimist, so there will be more good from bringing data together than there will be bad, but we're trying to put a safety net in place that protects society from frankly uses of data which we don't think is particularly appropriate.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'll add in here that a personal element from the benchmark learning here is, I think the danger in not educating everybody is that people will shut off and they won't share their data. And actually that's not necessarily a good thing for everybody. So we need to try and find those trust and transparency frameworks. I'm conscious of time. So Richard, if you'd like to have a comment, and then Nadine, I think this may be our last sort of main question today.
Okay, great. I'll try and make it brief. I think from our perspective, we work with partners inside these fragile conflict affected countries who are doing very detailed data collection exercise where they're conducting interviews, taking photographs and georeferenced videos for our subsequent analysis. Now, these guys are inside drug production laboratories deep in the Taliban-controlled areas of Afghanistan, which have recently been blown up by the international military. So there's huge sensitivities about the information that our partners are collecting on the ground. And they do that through a very well-developed process of local assurances around enabling that consent. And therefore, when the data comes to us in the raw forms that we do, we've got to work through a number of consent processes to determine what can be shared and with whom and in what format. So that's quite convoluted. But I guess my point here is that it comes down to resolution with these things. So what resolution are we able to share data? And when you combine one data set with another data set, it creates a different resolution, as David was saying. That becomes increasingly more powerful. And when you do that, so what to that? I think the simplest sort of parallel to this is, remote sensing. At what point is satellite imagery at 30 centimeters, 15 centimeters, or into drone and aircraft at 10, 5, an invasion of privacy when you're looking inside people's backyards? And I don't think that's resolved in any satisfactory way, because systems have moved far too fast for the controls and the mechanisms that David articulated to keep up and catch up.
Thank you, Richard. Nadine, did you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I'll be very quick. I want to echo David's, appreciation of the benchmark initiative and the ethical geo of AGS, because it's the right time. The best way I've heard this explained to me is because we're techies, right? And we're excited about the data and the data science and the AI and look what I can do, is we are letting the genie out of the bottle. And we have to be very, very careful. So this is the time to have these conversations. So we're having these conversations at the high level guidelines for government, for decision makers, and we're trying to do our part to go all the way down. It's like the developers and those enthusiastic geeks, we also have to give them the warning on the cigarette pack. It's like, warning, right? Before you go crazy and build the next app and deploy it, let's think about the implications and having a charter to point to, right? It's not a law or anything, but it's something that we agree on would be helpful for all the way to the top to the bottom. And I love the letting the genie out of the bottle. We have to always be careful. It could be used for harm.
That's a good description. On that charter, if people are interested, there is a draft version of the Locust Charter, which Benchmark has been working on with Ethical Geo. Head across to Benchmark Initiative if you're interested in that, and obviously get in touch with me if you're keen to know more about what we're doing with Benchmark. So with that little plug on what I do, I might have to draw this discussion to a close. I really appreciate that that's sort of where we ended, because I think that we've talked a huge amount about the value and the positive elements of what we do with geospatial, but I think it also is really heartening to hear that we we're understanding the challenges that we've got as well. And I think the responsibility of the power that we hold when using this data as well. So that was a great way for me to finish. I will introduce shortly now Andy Bennett, also from the Knowledge Transfer Network as well, just to share a few more words with us before we completely close. Andy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Denise. So I'm one of Luca's colleagues from the KTN, and he's asked me to provide a few wrap-up remarks. So firstly, thank you to the amazing panelists today and the great presentations and a really stimulating discussion. Personally, I believe that geospatial data and technology has the power to change the world, and I think we've heard some really great examples, particularly from Richard and Michael there, so that's brilliant. With this publication and webinar series, we really wanted to start to change the narrative around geospatial and to reach out beyond the sector to showcase those opportunities and to begin to look to the future to identify where geospatial plays an important role in areas such as building a better environment, creating smarter products and productivity gains for the UK economy. And it's been great to see the engagement and response from the geospatial sector and beyond. And we can see we're beginning to push out of our bubble. And we've done some surveying of the people who've been part of these webinars. It's been phenomenal to see that we've reached out into sectors such as sustainability, transport, the creative industries, the built environment, and the energy sectors the most. In fact, only 19% of the attendees reported that they were interested in geospatial. So this is great. Over 80% of the attendees wanted to find out more about what location can do from their sector and what are the trends they need to look out for in location data and technology. So again, this suggests we're reaching out into the non-traditional markets. And according to our data, those attendees tend to be the experienced people in sectors interested to find out how they can engage with the geospatial community. This is all great news, I think. So the KTN's role in this has been to connect across these sectors, people, geographies, to respond to those challenges and drive positive change through innovation. Although business is at the heart of what we do, our diverse connections span government, funders, research, and the third sector. And we've built this network of innovators, business, academic, and government contacts to open up new opportunities beyond the existing thinking and accelerate ambitious ideas into real-world solutions. So we really hope that you will join our network if you haven't already, and through a strong collaborative effort, we can continue this journey to where geospatial data will empower us to have an impact on real-world challenges. This marks the end of our Power of Place publication webinars. So I'd also like to extend a huge thanks to our collaborators on this, the Ordnance Survey. They've been incredible partners for the publication and the webinars, and we really look forward to working with them again in the future. Similarly, we'd like to thank all those facilitators and speakers who offered their time and support to the webinars, and the insightful contributors to the Power of Place and the organisations that they belong to. So from Nesta to the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, from the AGI to Innovate UK. So really massive thanks to you all for helping our community on this journey. So although this webinar series is now at an end, there's plenty more happening as part of our Geospatial Insights Innovation Network. On the 26th of November, we'll be hosting a Geo AI mini conference featuring speakers from Esri, Deep Planet AI, Sensat, and Mantle Labs. And on the 10th of December, we'll be running a webinar exploring the use of augmented and virtual reality in gaming in the geospatial sector. Into the new year, we're going to be supporting a Horizon 2020 project called UFO, which will support geospatial companies to develop new products and services for sectors such as maritime, transport, and the creative industries, as well as solutions to tackle climate change. So watch out for news and especially funding available through that programme. Next year, our focus is going to be on how location intelligence helps tackle global challenges from climate change to net zero. And we'll be building inclusive communities to support life above and below Earth. And we want to showcase the Power of Place. So stay tuned as we build a programme towards COP26. To find out more, please get in touch with Luca or I, sign up to our newsletters. And final thanks go to our awesome backroom staff who make all of this happen. Andrew Kutin from Marketing and Comms, and Poonam from our events team, who are essential to what we do here. And Luca has been great at pulling all of this off. So great thanks to him as well. And I'll leave it there. Thank you for participating.
Thank you, Andy. As you can see, there's plenty of opportunity to get involved in further conversations. So do join up to KTN's network. Have a look at the AGI events. We've got things I know with Tech UK as well. So there's a lot of geospatial conversation to get involved with. So find your area of interest and do keep on talking with us. Certainly for me today, I came away with takeaways, I think, for us as our geospatial community, that we need to make it more personal. We need to look at ways that we can be better storytellers, really realize that power of that storytelling that we've got. And I think that lead up and goal of COP26 next year is a great one for us to kind of rally around as a community to be part of. With that, I will say thank you so much to all our attendees that have been with us today. I'm really sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. A lot of them were fantastic. So I'm certainly keen to go back and have a look through them all. And lastly, I will say thank you very much to each of our presenters for your insightful presentations, but also for engaging in the discussion with us afterwards. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
Bye, Denise. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks now. Bye all.